I'm coming to every Nigerian with a very serious, heavy heart. Because I thought that at this stage of our lives, especially when we're getting older, we should begin to think about Nigeria and how we can all live together in peace. As of today, I have supported over 10,000 Muslims across northern Nigeria. They have no relationship with me at all. Whether it is the school of their children, whether it is their housekeeping, it is home issues and all of that. But look at this bastard that called himself a religious leader. These are the kind of people that I suppose that government should pick. But I can see the governor of Kano State. This is how insane all of you are in northern Nigeria, some of you. This is the way you think. People that are brainless. Somebody is standing there in your meeting shouting Muslim, calling Christians infidels. And I'm going to go take this. If Christians should do this, who is going to have a country? Northern Nigeria, Muslims with the highest, you talk about the highest capital poverty of the world. Are you not ashamed? Are you not ashamed that banditry is here in the north? Criminality is here in the north. It is here in the north you have the highest level of drug addicts that you are supposed to be, if you are sane, to begin to preach the message that will help to bring people out of bondage and out of their captivity. You are there making stupid statement and inciting against Christians and calling them, look at them, infidels, if they think they have voting power. Woe to any Christian that is going to align themselves with these evil, brainless people and creatures. And I'm speaking to my Muslim brothers who are saying, you cannot be allowing this kind of creatures to be flowing among you. And I want to say to all the Kano people, it's time that whatever is your name, the governor of Kano, it's time you throw that guy out of that seat. He doesn't deserve it. Look at it. I'm going to play the video. If a governor is sitting under such kind of evil hate speech and he's praising this wicked evil man called Jingir, whatever your name is, your cup is full. It will not be well with you. And God's word cannot be broken. It shall not be well with the wicked. Nigeria belongs to
Ahmed Bola Tinubu, wanda ya daga tutar siyasa ya mata kirari da Muslim mace ina daya daga cikin masu daga tutar musulunci mu kira jama'a ku taho mu yi Muslim. Na sani cewa kafirai na jin zafin wannan kalma, to amma ba akwai kiristoci ba akwai yahudawa ba akwai masu bautar magiro ba. Ni musulmi mai wazin musulunci da na ce muslim mai na taɓa nasu. Na hana kirishin ya faɗa ne, na hana magiro ya faɗa ne, na hana ɗan tantar wata ya faɗa ne. Amma ni a matsayi na musulmi, muslim, sha'a man sha'a au aba. Amma wani zai ce ai to demokradiya ne, ai akwai suwa ne.
What if the biggest danger facing Nigeria's 2027 election is not who wins the presidency, but what Nigerians are being told to vote for? But just before we continue, in case you're new to this channel, please subscribe, share and comment, as well as hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on our update. What makes this development particularly serious is not simply that a Muslim cleric has endorsed a Muslim ticket. In a democracy, religious leaders has the same right as other citizens to support a political candidate or political arrangement. The deeper issue is what happens when religious identity becomes the primary instrument for political mobilization and when political competition begins to sound like a contest between religious communities rather than a contest over governance. The reported comment attributed to Sheikh Yahya therefore deserves to be examined carefully without exaggerating, but also without ignoring their potential consequences. His reported support for the Muslim ticket and call for Muslims to obtain their PVCs come at a particular sensitive moment. because the 2027 election is already being shaped by questions of religion, regional power, and political realignment. Former Kano Governor Rabiu Kwankwaso has recently warned that the Muslim ticket will remain an issue in 2027, while President Bola Tinubu's camp has defended retaining the Tinubu-Shettima arrangement. The first distinction that must be made is between supporting a same-faith ticket and using religion to define political citizenship. There is nothing unconstitutional about two Muslims contesting together. Nigeria's constitution does not require a president and vice president to belong to different religions. The controversy begins when voters are encouraged to see political power primarily through the lens of Muslim versus Christians. That distinction is crucial because Nigeria is not a Muslim country or a Christian country. It is a religiously diverse country. Pew Research estimates that Muslims constitute about 56.1% of the population and Christians about 43.4% in 2020. That means even if one accepts the arrangement, the argument that Muslims constitute a numerical majority status does not give one religion group ownership of the Nigerian state. Democracy is not simply majority rule, it is also protection of minorities and equal citizenship. This is where the language reported in the video becomes especially important. If a cleric describes Christians as infidels in a political gathering, that is far more consequential than simply saying, "I support Tinubu." Once a political rally begins using language that places one religious community outside the moral or political community of the nation, the political consequences can be enormous. And this is where the reaction of the audience and political actors becomes important too. If politicians laugh, remain silent, or appear comfortable while inflammatory religious language is being used, the public can reasonably ask whether political leaders are willing to establish boundaries between legitimate religious expression and rhetorics capable of deepening communal division. However, we should also be careful not to make the opposite mistake. One controversial speech should not automatically be interpreted as proof that Nigeria is heading towards a religious war. That would turn political analysis into alarmism. Nigeria's insecurity is considerably more complicated than a simple Muslim-Christian conflict. Boko Haram and ISWAP have attacked Muslims as well as Christians. Banditry in the northwest affects Muslim communities heavily. Farmer-herder conflicts involve ethnic, economic, territorial, and political dimensions, and criminal kidnapping networks are motivated primarily by money. Recent reporting and analysis of violence in northern Nigeria similarly caution against reducing the country's security crisis to a purely religious conflict. That distinction matters enormously. If every attack in Nigeria is presented as a Christian versus Muslim war, Nigeria may begin interpreting every political disagreement through that framework. A kidnapping becomes religious, a political appointment becomes religious, a gubernatorial election becomes religious, a military operation becomes religious. Eventually, citizens stop seeing one another primarily as Nigerians, and that is the real danger. There is also a political calculation behind the mobilization. The instruction to obtain PVCs is not by itself problematic. In fact, encouraging citizens to register and vote is healthy and democracy. The question is what political identity the mobilization is built around. If the message becomes, "Get your PVC because Muslim must capture political power," that changes the character of the mobilization. It transforms the PVC from a democratic instrument into a religious weapon, and that could have enormous implications for 2027. Tinubu's decision to retain Kashim Shettima as his running mate has already reopened the same-faith ticket debate. Kwankwaso has explicitly argued that the issue will remain politically relevant in 2027, while Tinubu supporters argue that Nigerians already accepted the ticket in 2023 and that the administration should be judged by its performance rather than the religion of the president and vice president. Both sides have a legitimate political argument. The APC can say Nigerians knew the religions of both candidates in 2023 and still voted for them. Opponents can respond, winning an election does not mean the religious concerns have disappeared, particularly when the same argument is being deliberately retained for another election. That is why Jingir's reported intervention is politically significant. It potentially reinforces the perception among critics that the same faith ticket is not merely an electoral calculation, but part of a broader religious mobilization. But there is another side to this argument that should not be ignored. It would be intellectually dishonest to suggest that only Muslim political mobilization is responsible for religious politics in Nigeria. Christian organizations, pastors and Christian political groups have also endorsed candidates, mobilized voters and publicly discussed political power through religious lenses. In 2023, for example, there were Christian leaders who openly supported the Tinubu-Shettima ticket despite the same faith controversy. So the standard should be the same. If religious mobilization is dangerous when Muslims do it, it is also dangerous when Christians do it. Nigeria cannot solve religious politics by replacing Muslim political mobilization with Christian political mobilization. That would simply create competing religious camps. The more important question should be, can Nigeria move from who is our Muslim candidate or who is our Christian candidate to who can govern Nigeria? That is where the 2027 election could become very interesting. Religion therefore becomes politically powerful precisely when citizens are frustrated and distrustful of institutions. And there is another irony here. Nigeria's ordinary citizens, Muslim and Christians, are facing many of the same problems. A Muslim trader in Kano and a Christian trader in Abia can both be destroyed by inflation. A Christian farmer in Benue and a Muslim farmer in Zamfara can both be attacked by criminals. A Muslim parent in Kaduna and Christian parent in Enugu can both struggle to pay school fees. Poverty does not ask for your religion before entering your house. Insecurity does not ask for your denomination before kidnapping you. Unemployment does not ask whether you are Muslim or Christian before taking away your future. That is why religious political mobilization can ultimately become a distraction from governance. That is why the comment should not be treated as an isolated religious speech. They sit side a much bigger political chessboard. There is also a danger for the Muslim community itself. When political leaders or clerics suggest that Muslims should vote for a bloc because they are Muslims, they create an expectation that Muslims must think politically alike. But Nigerian Muslims are not one political party. They are different ethnicities, economic interests, sects, political affiliations, and ideological positions. A Muslim in Kano does not automatically have the same political interest as a Muslim in Lagos, Sokoto, Borno, Kwara, or Rivers. The same applies to Christians. A Christian in Abia does not automatically have the same political interest as a Christian in Kaduna or Benue. So reducing millions of Nigerians to religious voting blocs is politically convenient but socially inaccurate. The most worrying possibility is what happens if politicians on both sides respond by escalating the rhetorics. One cleric says, in effect, Muslims must mobilize. A Christian political leader responds, Christians must mobilize. Another politician says, our religion is under attack. Another responds, our people must take back power. At that point, the 2027 election stops being primarily about competing visions for Nigeria and begins to resemble a census of religious strength. That would be extremely dangerous. It could also affect voter behavior outside northern Nigeria. In the south, particularly in areas where there is already suspicion about the APC's religious composition, statements of this nature can reinforce existing fears. Those fears can then be exploited by opposition politicians. Controversy in northern communities, aggressive criticism of Muslim mobilization can be portrayed as an attack on Muslims. That can produce another cycle of defensive mobilization. This is how political polarization works. One side's mobilization becomes the evidence used by the other side to justify its own mobilization. The greatest beneficiary is usually not the ordinary citizens. The political elite benefits. There is another issue that deserves attention: the difference between religious freedom and religious capture of political space. Nigeria should absolutely protect the freedom of Muslims to preach Islam and Christians to preach Christianity, but political institutions must remain neutral. Government offices, security agencies, public resources, and constitutional rights cannot belong to one right. That is why the response to controversial cleric rhetoric should not be censorship of religion. It should be stronger democratic norms. Religious leaders should be free to express political opinions, but politicians should also be held accountable for the company they keep and the rhetoric they endorse. One citizen should ask every candidate a simple question: what will you do for Nigerians who do not share your religion? The question is more important than whether the candidate is Muslim or Christian. There's also a major implication for President Tinubu. If Tinubu wants to neutralize concerns about the Muslim ticket, the strongest response will not be another political speech defending the argument. It will be demonstrable evidence that Christians, Muslims, and Nigerians of different ethnic backgrounds have equal access to government appointments, security protection, and economic opportunity. The administration's own supporters have argued that its record demonstrates that it does not govern on religious lines. The claim can ultimately be tested through evidence, not slogans. And the opposition faces the same test. If opposition parties attack the Muslim ticket while simultaneously mobilizing voters primarily through Christian identity, they will be vulnerable to the accusation that they are not opposed to religious politics. They are simply opposed to losing religious politics. That is why this issue should be handled with extraordinary care. The video's warning about Nigerian stability therefore has a legitimate concern at its core, but some of its conclusion appears stronger than the evidence allows. The most important issue here is therefore not whether Sheikh Yahya is Muslim, whether Tinubu is Muslim, whether Shetima is Muslim, or whether Christians oppose the ticket. The question is whether Nigeria's 2027 election will be an election between Nigerians or a competition between religious blocs. Because if Nigerians vote according to competence, security, economy, education, healthcare, and integrity, religion becomes one factor among many. But if politicians successfully convince citizens that the election is about which religion will control Nigeria, then the country could enter 2027 with an extremely dangerous political atmosphere. And perhaps the biggest lesson from the controversy is this: a Muslim ticket is not by itself evidence of an Islamization agenda. Nigeria's strength is precisely that it contains both Muslims and Christians in enormous numbers alongside traditional beliefs and people of no religious affiliation. The objective should not be to determine which group is numerically stronger. The objective should be to ensure that neither group needs to fear the other in order to feel politically secured. That is the real test for Tinubu, Abba Yusuf, Kwankwaso, the opposition parties, religious leaders, and ultimately Nigerian voters heading into 2027. In case you're new to this channel, please subscribe, share, and comment, as well as hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on our update. Till next time, stay informed and stay connected.